We had like more than 100,000 people coming into the platform at one time, and it actually crashed our servers. I couldn't imagine doing this journey alone, because when you get into situations like your website is crashing and things are going up, it feels like it's the end of the world. And it feels like everything is going to go wrong. Someone who actually wants to start a business here, I think number one thing is to have a local partner that you very much trust, that you have some history with. So my main thing is always start by talking to customers and really understand what is their real need and problem.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan, the Executive Director of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm sitting here today with Austin Carter. Austin is a fellow Canadian hailing from Ottawa who has been living in Vietnam since 2015. He is a co-founder and the CFO of an edtech startup called Edu2Review. Edu2Review is a course booking and education assessment platform with over 1 million users monthly. It has won several awards, including first prize in Startup Wheel 2016, first prize in the Susu startup competition for Southeast Asia, and many others. Austin has raised 2 rounds of funding for Edu2Review, and I'm here to talk to him today about what it's like to be a Canadian entrepreneur in Vietnam. Austin, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me, Ryan. It's a pleasure to sit down and talk with you.
And I'm looking forward to that conversation. But let's get right into it. So what drew you to Vietnam?
So the story of me getting to Vietnam, I think it's like many people, a wandering path. So it started about 8 years ago when I was studying abroad in Lyon, France. So this was during my 3rd year of university, and I met a Vietnamese guy. We became good friends. He was one of the hardest working, most creative people I'd ever met. So after getting to know each other, we started to share some business ideas, and we said that someday that we're going to reconnect. After finishing my studies abroad, I went back to university, graduated with an honors degree in finance, and was working with a technology consulting company. During that time, I got a phone call from my friend in Vietnam, and he told me this idea for a startup that would help to change education in Asia. I thought, well, this sounds like a pretty interesting and exciting idea. And because I've been good friends with them, so I basically told my job, I'm going to take 3 months. I'm going to go travel Asia, and let's go see what all this is about. So, of course, I did some initial research to look on the market. So I looked at Vietnam and Southeast Asia in general. And some of the things that I saw was that this very young population. So you've got 40% or something of the people are under the age of 30. You've got 7% GDP growth year over year happening. You've got the financial system is really starting to develop, as well as technology, and just really the internet is really taking off into kind of wave 2 of Web 2.0. All of these trends were happening at the same time. And then I looked at like the Canadian market, and I was seeing, well, GDP growth of 1% a year, things kind of felt kind of slow moving. So this is what made me excited to at least go check it out to see what was happening. So from there, I hopped on a plane and got over to Vietnam, where stepped out of that Ho Chi Minh airport into a wave of 35-degree heat and motorbikes flying everywhere. And my friend from university was there, Juan, to meet me. And from then on, we just got right into it and started building.
And the rest is history, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I guess we're going to be talking about that next.
Well, you talked a little bit about why you decided to found a startup here in Vietnam as opposed to in Canada, but what brought you to EdTech? Was it just your co-founder's idea, or is there something about the education market here that really appealed to you?
So originally, Juan, my co-founder, and I, we started a business that was built around increasing trust between people and businesses. So one of the problems that happened, especially online, when you were buying products on an e-commerce website, you didn't know what you were going to get in the mail back. You'd be 2015, 2016. You didn't know if this stuff was real or fake. There's a lot of problems with internet trust, as well as within the education space. There are more than 1,000 different tuition centers. These will spring up, they're for profit, and there's dozens of stories, even still happen today, of companies that set up a business, have a good reputation, bring in a lot of student deposits, and then shut down and disappear. And they cheat their people out of money. And this really creates this mistrust in the system. So the original startup idea was how to solve that through a combination of qualitative and quantitative information to kind of understand a business's trustworthiness. So after a year and a half of running that business, we didn't have a good functioning business model. However, we did see that a segment of our users, about 50% of the platform, was using it specifically to evaluate universities and tuition centers to get an understanding of, can I trust a school? Is it a good quality school or person that I can hire as a tutor? And so we did an assessment of this. We saw this engagement. We went out and we talked with hundreds of university students and parents, went around to probably 50 different schools, talked with the administrators there. We saw that there was this business opportunity that existed. So in January 2017, we decided to basically pivot the business, rebranded, hired a new team, and focus entirely on building for the education markets here.
Okay, and you're still here a few years later, and that's always a good start for a young business like yours. What has been the key to your success so far?
So I look at that on kind of the business side and the personal side, and then as well as how do we define success. So on the business side, I think one of the key things that we've been doing well from the beginning is that we are constantly talking with our customers. So because a lot of on the platform, people are writing reviews and discussing about different schools. So one of the practices that we implemented is that myself and our team, we actually go into the classrooms of all of our partner schools to talk directly with the students who are studying there. So personally, I've been to more than 250 language schools across the country. Potentially, I might have visited more English schools than anyone else in the country because of this role, and talked with thousands of students about their experience and what's going on. And that keeps us very close to the market and what people care about. And we're able to take those learnings and bring that into our product. So being very close to the market, I think it's been important on the business side. Secondly, on the business side, that's been very helpful is from those understandings, we were able to translate that into content on our website, content on the platform, and into the product, which was very good for bringing in traffic and bringing in users in a digital sense. So we took those, talking to the customers and understanding the needs is the first, and then we translated that into content and product features that would make it very interesting to come to our platform to use it. So that way we were able to find our target audience in a digital sense so that they could come to us. One real story about this is in 2017, we surveyed about 5,000 different university students about their satisfaction level with their university. We put that into a report and we released it as called it a happiness index, satisfaction index for universities. And we did it as a research report. The effect of this was a massive spike in traffic and demand, so much so that we had more than 100,000 people coming into the platform at one time. And it actually crashed our servers, which we were not ready for. And our new head of technology, who's now our CTO, was figuring out how to keep everything up and running. So that was, I think, a combination of the talking to customers, translating that into content, them releasing something that they really care about. And that's what made us quite famous within the university decision-making space.
Wow, I didn't know that story about the site crashing because you got so much traffic. That's, I guess, not a bad problem to have, right? So.
Well, when you're in the when you're in the moment, it's can be a little bit stressful. And so I said that the success kind of came down to two parts. So one was on the business side, and then I think on the personal side of things is really important too. So now that we've been running this business for 6 years, the fact that I have one co-founder and Juan from the beginning, my other co-founder, Eric, who's our CTO, and we brought on in 2017, I couldn't imagine doing this journey alone, because when you get into situations like your website is crashing and things are going up, it feels like it's the end of the world. And it feels like everything is going to go wrong. And you're super stressed, you're not, whether it's sleeping at night or dealing with this stress is very difficult. So I think it's important to be able to manage that stress and those ups and downs, whether it's the highs or the lows, to be able to manage that with a partner or two business partners and good personal health and routines. That's very important as well too.
Well, good advice for anyone in the startup ecosystem, wherever they may be in the world. Speaking of stress, you've raised capital a few times now. Was that more or less difficult, do you think, than raising if Edu2Review were Canada-based? So
I've only raised capital in Vietnam before. So I'm speaking from the perspective of basically being here and understanding that. I think it was more difficult for sure, just for the basis of if we were in Canada or North America, there's a lot more available capital for investment. So I think the model of a startup getting shares in a startup that's going to grow over the long term and potentially have a massive exit, it has a much larger proven trend in the North American startup ecosystem for investors. So there's many more venture capitalists, there's many more angel investors who are familiar with this model and are willing to give up to put capital into new ideas that can potentially become massive. When we went to raise our first round of capital in 2018, this market is, I would say it's even still developing today in Vietnam, but it's quite a nascent market here. And there's new venture capitalists are coming here. A little bit of capital was coming into the market, but the big exits and the big company valuations, you didn't have Grab, you didn't have Momo, you didn't have these, VNG was quite a bit smaller at the time, but there wasn't a lot of companies that you could point to that said, wow, this is a, unicorn success. Not like a Shopify in Ottawa, or a Nortel Networks, and this kind of history of venture capital and massive financial success from it in Canada. So I think to raise capital in Canada probably would have been easier. You could have raised more money as well too. Yeah.
But as you say, that's changing. It is a nascent market that is having more and more access to capital, and there are a lot of people of whatever nationality looking at the opportunities of the Vietnamese market more and more. On this topic, for someone on the outside, say a Canadian, potentially looking at the market, or just anyone who's interested in Vietnam, what is something that would surprise them about working in the Vietnamese ecosystem?
So I'll talk about a couple things. So one thing that I think is very positive about the ecosystem here and getting a business started here is that the amount of regulation and requirements to get set up and started is quite low. So it's pretty easy to get a business up and running and started once you have a lawyer to do the incorporation, but not many people are going to be knocking on your door or bothering you when you're a small company within Vietnam. And so what that allows you to do is that you can be a lot more nimble and you can test out a lot of real reality. So for hiring people, for example, you can bring someone onto your team for a couple months without having to go through an extensive registration process of bringing that. Where in Canada, there's very strict rules and regulations around hiring new people and letting people go. Where in Vietnam, I think it's a bit more flexible. And what that allows you to do, especially in the early days, is to be able to bring people on the company if they don't work out. It's kind of a low cost impact. And the people here understand that, and they're willing to work within that environment. So the people side, so the employees, they are accepting of the environment and they want to be able to work within it. So that is one thing in terms of regulations. So getting started, testing new products, you don't need to ask for permission for a lot of things to do. So I think the getting started phase is very positive. Secondly, I think in terms of if you're doing a IT startup or a technical startup, the cost of labor is considerably lower than in North America. So to hire developers, to hire key marketing people, your salary basis is much lower. So this cost to start up is much cheaper. Now, the flip side of that, I think that people are surprised about. You've got 90 million people in the country, almost 100 million people in the country. But your revenue, if you're doing a consumer business, your revenue per user in most categories is considerably lower than it is in the US or Canada or Singapore, right? If you have a GDP per capita in the country of maybe $3,000, $4,000 in Vietnam, in Canada, it's $40,000. So you're looking at a 10x difference there. So depending on the product category you go into, you can't take your revenue per user assumptions from the Canadian market and just apply them to 100 million people here. It's very, very different in that sense. Now, I think within education, which is an area where people are willing to invest the money for good quality education, we see that within our consumer base that they may not be paying the same level of Canada, but they may be paying 50% the amount. So that's difference in pricing still makes for a very large opportunity.
Well, on the back of that, do you have any advice for any Canadians that might be looking at the market? I mean, you've shed some insights now, but I find that a lot of people look at the market and they see something very appealing, but they're not really sure how to start. Do you have any advice for anyone who might be considering making that step from Canada?
So first thing I would recommend is to come visit here first to actually see what's going on. I did not visit Vietnam before moving here. However, when I did move here, I still had a guaranteed job to go back to. So my level of risk was very low. I kind of consider it like a test, short-term test to test out the viability. It's going to cost, maybe $5,000 to $10,000, and if it wasn't happy, I could always go back to Canada and resume a job. Now, for someone who actually wants to start a business here, I think number one thing is to have a local partner that you very much trust. That you have some history with. And I was very fortunate in that Juan has been a longtime friend of mine, we were good friends in university. He has very strong ethics behind him, as well as extremely hardworking and one of the most creative people I've ever met. So maybe I was lucky, maybe it's just a judge of character, but being able to work with him has helped immensely in solving a lot of the small things like your HR management, your legal, your taxation, getting these things right. Having that local partner will just save you so much hassle and headaches. It's really critical to have. So number one, I would say, would be on having a local partner. Number two, I would be looking when you get here, depending on the industry, a lot of things are relationship driven. So for specific industries, I mean, I don't work in fintech, but within fintech, there's regulatory hurdles that you have to get over in order to launch your product and get your product fully scaled up, which need to be addressed. And typically, you're going to need a local partner for that. As well, for the education space, the private tuition centers like language schools that we mostly work with, they are profit driven. And so they're quite a bit more open to testing in new ideas and technology and something that's going to help to improve their business. But if you're working on the education side where it's more government owned and controlled, a space where you definitely need a local partner and strong relationships.
I think that's great advice. I actually give the same to people asking about the market all the time that aren't thinking about startups, but are thinking about just moving their business here. So good advice. Just as a final note then, any advice for entrepreneurs that are already in Vietnam of whatever nationality, Vietnamese or foreign?
So my main thing is always start by talking to customers and really understand what is their real need and problem. And then as you build your product or your service, whatever it is, the real test of validation and success is when your customers are willing to pay for it. And so when you say you've built this or you have this product and you deliver it to them, like when we go to a school, and you have a very high conversion rate of schools wanting to work with us because we're hitting exactly what they need. We're helping them to bring in new students, which is helping them to grow their business. So really understanding that customer need and why they use your product, that would be my number one piece of advice for entrepreneurs everywhere. And then two is have fun with it. I think that's important too, because if you're kind of an analytical or serious, very focused person, and it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day stresses and minutia, and you get carried on with the business. But remember that business should be fun. It should be something that you enjoy going in, working every day, and being with your peers and meeting your customers. This should feel like an enjoyable thing for you every day, and that'll help you to really get through the downs, because there's a lot of them, as well as the ups that come with it.
I think both great pieces of advice. Thanks so much for that, Austin. And thanks for joining me here today. For anyone who'd like to know more about Edu2Review, be sure to check them out at edu2review.com. Check out Austin on LinkedIn and just learn a little bit more about his business. He's one of the few Canadian entrepreneurs in Vietnam, and so he's got an interesting story. That's it for us today. Thanks so much for joining us, and Austin, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Yes, and if anyone's listening, they want to reach out, feel free to reach out, whatever it is, and hopefully I can help you with whatever business need that you have, or connect you with the right people who can.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for watching today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and be sure to look for our future interviews.